Hello everyone, welcome to tonight's webinar, Tired of Being Tired, Tips, Tools, and Techniques to Keep You Going. My name is Brian Thompson, Programs Manager for Can-Do Multiple Sclerosis, and I will be your host this evening. Find out more information about our programs at our website, www.mscando.org. And you can also learn more about our organization on our various social media outlets. Tonight's webinar on fatigue management has four main objectives. One is identify the causes and symptoms of primary and secondary fatigue. Two, recognize, track, and assess your fatigue while utilizing the 4 Ps to make life changes that will allow you to manage your energy and feel less tired. 3, understand how heat and inactivity affect fatigue. And 4, increase energy through medical management, cooling techniques, and an exercise program combining stretching, strengthening, and aerobic training. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our presenters for the webinar. Since 1991, physical therapist Patty Bobryk has worked for Orlando Health in collaboration with the Comprehensive Care Center of Central Florida. As an MS certified specialist, Patty has been active in the MS Society's Chapter Advisory Committee and has provided educational seminars nationwide on rehabilitation with multiple sclerosis. She served as the chair of the International Organization of Multiple Sclerosis Rehabilitation Therapists since 2008 and is currently serving as secretary for the Consortium of MS Centers. And Juliann Hanson-Zlatev, a programs consultant with Can-Do MS for over 10 years, is an occupational therapist specializing in neurological rehabilitation and myofascial release. Among her many accomplishments in 23 years of multiple sclerosis care, Juliann worked with the Rocky Mountain MS Center, teaching seminars regarding MS symptom management. Juliann has also specialized in outpatient therapy for 15 years and now owns her own clinic, Red Willow LLC, located in Castle Rock, Colorado. So without further ado, it's my honor to present Patty and Juliann to talk about Tired of Being Tired, Tips, Tools, and Techniques to Keep You Going.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brian, and thank you all for joining us this evening. And we'll just jump right in. What is fatigue? Well, it's just being tired, right? I mean, it's just you can get a good night's rest or lay down and take a little nap, and boom, there you go. You're good to continue on. Well, I think everyone who has tuned into the webinar tonight knows that that's not exactly the case, that there are different types of fatigue. And I think it's very important to be able, especially when we're describing what MS fatigue feels like to friends and family and coworkers and people who want to support us, is to be able to describe the difference. So for the purposes of our conversation tonight, we're going to be talking about primary fatigue, which is also known as lassitude, and secondary fatigue. And primary fatigue we know to be a direct consequence of the MS process in the body. We think, we don't know entirely, but we think it's due to the immune dysregulation that's going on. And so flu-like symptoms and fatigue, because of the overactivation of the immune system, plays a role. We also think that demyelination is thought to play a role. And demyelination, as we know, myelin helps speed the central nervous system signals throughout the body. So when a nerve is being demyelinated, the body has to work a lot harder in order to get the messages down through the body. And we think that that might also be a part of that fatigue. That fatigue has been described as being total and complete. It's very different from other types of fatigue that we tend to feel. It's not a fatigue that you can tend to just push yourself on through and will yourself through it and then maybe later in the day catch up for yourself. I've heard people describe it to me like I hit a brick wall, or I just got completely unplugged, like I had no more energy left. So it's really something that changes the game of our daily activities, and it's really important for us to know how to manage that. So what is secondary fatigue? For the purposes of our conversation tonight, it's really everything else. It's fatigue that can come from being sleep deprived or a medication side effect. It can be fatigue that is related to depression or physical deconditioning or from stress. It's also important to know that this secondary type of fatigue can be induced by other kinds of health-related issues like a low-functioning thyroid or as you're coming into menopause or things like that. The thing that's important to talk about right now is because you have MS, you would really have two types of fatigue that you're dealing with. So it's really important to pay attention to secondary fatigue and address and make sure you're getting treated for all the things that you need to do if you suspect that there are other factors at play other than having MS. For the purposes of our conversation tonight, we're going to be talking mostly about primary fatigue. And the good news is that there are many ways to tackle it. And the other good news is that a lot of some of the secondary fatigue factors also respond to the techniques that Patty and I are going to discuss tonight. So I'm going to toss this over to Patty. There are many different ways to track fatigue. Patty, what are some of those ways?
Thank you, Juliann, and I'd like to, from myself, also welcome everyone to the webinar tonight. So I want to be able to have some ways that you'll be able to have conversations not only with your family and friends, but also for your healthcare providers so we can provide some strategies on ways to best tackle your. Ask yourself some questions. How do you feel when you're fatigued? And good descriptors. Dan already gave us some that hitting that ball. I have one patient who describes it to me as I feel like a wet wool blanket has been placed over me, and I very, very descriptive. You can kind of all sense that, oh, I understand what that feels like. Or that my mind is willing, but my body is just unable, no matter how much I think to look at your in a very technologically advanced world these days, and a lot of people like to just do everything on their phone. On the left-hand side of your screen, you see an daily energy tracker, and that's just a nice way to kind of just very quickly down and dirty, kind of mark on a scale of how you felt after. On the right side of your screen is actually an app that you can keep on your phone, and this one isn't specific to MS. It really was something that I downloaded called the Symptom Tracker and Healthy Diary, and it can be for any diagnosis anyone might, but it allows you to download ways to track different symptoms. You can use fatigue as one of your symptoms. There are symptoms that are available in that weakness or your sleep. So that's another way. And then you'll have to look at what needs to change. Do I need to change myself? If I have certain expectations on myself that really lead me to believe that I need to do certain things in a way at a certain time, I don't do those things, that somehow I'm not fulfilling. I need to really consider, do I need to change how the activities are done? Talk more about that. And then, do I need to change the environmental layout or where the activity takes place? I'm sitting down is better than standing, and it's an easy change for someone to make in their activity to make it less fatiguing. So now I'm going to turn it over to Juliann, and she's going to talk to us about the 4 Ps, which are great strategies when you're approaching.
So the 4 Ps are a great mnemonic that I like to use to manage fatigue, and they are planning, prioritization, pacing, and positioning. And if you are incorporating these 4 Ps into your daily thinking about how to manage fatigue, chances are pretty good that you are managing your fatigue in a very holistic way. And so it's a good way to look at all the places, some of the things that all the things that where we lose energy or where we could save a little energy. If you're incorporating all 4 of those, it's likely that you're starting to sew that up and get closer to that. So planning, Patty talked about some of the various tools that we can use for good and effective planning, and some of those technological ones are really awesome. But you can use the things that really help you. You can incorporate the things that you're already using, or you can start bringing in some new things if that's amenable to you. So using a planner, using a calendar, your phone. What I really recommend is that you have a family calendar. If there's more than one person in your household and you need to incorporate somebody else's schedule into yours. It's really helpful, and as long as everybody is contributing to the calendar and putting everything on it, it works very nicely because then you don't have any surprises at the end of the day. The other trick to planning is to look ahead by day, week, and by month. So you're not just looking from one day to the next. You're planning in advance for the week and for the month, and that really helps us with the pacing that we'll be talking about a little bit down the road. The other thing, if anybody has ever spent much time around an occupational therapist, we're very fond of talking about an energy bank that is comparable to our financial bank. When we run out of money, it's not a simple matter just to bring in a little bit more money. Well, the same thing is true of our fatigue. If we run out of energy, then we're behind, and it's hard to catch up. So what we would suggest is making deposits into your energy bank, the same way that you do into your financial bank, so that you will end up having the energy to do your daily activities. And part of the trick of that we're going to talk about a little bit later is planning for what you want to do and for what you need to do in the day. And there's a really important reason for that later on. But let's talk about banking strategies right now. Rest before feeling fatigued. So I have uttered that statement to people, and they have said, "Really? I mean, how can you actually do that? Because by the time I know I'm tired, I'm really tired. I'm there." So there are a few tricks to that, and Patty talked about some of the ways to tune into your body that will give you some cues and some ideas about how to manage the fatigue and to start that earlier on. So the most important thing that you can think about is rest does not have to be an hour's worth of a nap or an all-night nap or even really just taking a long period of time. Rest can be in a place or a position where your body and your mind receive rest. So that can be meditation or visualization. It can be a nap. It can be reading. It can be making phone calls, depending upon who you're talking to. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. Other strategies for putting energy deposits into your energy bank are using good ergonomics, and that's part of positioning, and we'll talk about that, but also using tools and devices. So things for mobility like a cane or a walker or a scooter or one of those motorized grocery carts. Most of the time when people, when your occupational or physical therapist bring these things up, it may seem a little surprising. You may think, well, I really didn't think that, my walking was that bad, and I really don't think I need that. But we actually may be talking to you about that because of fatigue management. That if we can firm up how you are moving and you are moving more efficiently, then you will use less energy to do that, and that matters at the end of the day. There are a myriad of wonderful things for cooking that make cutting and preparing and cooking actually easier to do, and those are all ways to save energy. Communication is an important strategy, and Patty's going to be talking about exercise and keeping cool. I also want to encourage you to look into getting good sleep, the role that nutrition, hydration, and medications will play in managing fatigue. So now we'll talk just a little bit about the wants and needs. Your day, we recommend, should have a mixture of wants and needs, as well as high, medium, and low priorities. And this, what that does is it creates flexibility in your day. The reason it's important to put in wants and needs is that many times when I've done personal counseling with people, I hear them say to me, well, I used to sew, or I used to go out to coffee with my friends, or I used to go horseback riding. And those are things that they have, because they're their own personal hobbies, they've dropped them, and because they don't seem as important, they're not a high priority. And so those are also things that sustain us and make us who we are, and they are also a form of respite and energy banking. And so it's important to be able to put those in, and sometimes you just have to make them come in and be a part of your schedule. So that brings us to prioritization. Getting your most important tasks certainly scheduled when you can accomplish them is really helpful. But most of the time when I sit down and do one-on-one counseling with people, they will make their entire day. So let's say they have 10 things on their to-do list, and they will make sure that everything is a high priority. Well, let's say that you run out of energy, or your energy starts to ebb around 2 o'clock, and you've maybe accomplished 5 or 6 of those things. Now you're stuck with four or five things that are yet on your to-do list that you deem very important. And that really is hard on us and really creates a lot of stress and more fatigue. So we want to make sure that you are putting priorities as high, medium, and low and weaving them in so that you can drop those things. So let's say you can take laundry and move that to another day of the week. Or you can call somebody and say, hey, can my son carpool with yours to go to soccer practice tonight? Keeping a variety of priorities is really helpful. That brings us to pacing, which is arguably the hardest P in my book. And Patty's going to talk about a work-rest-work strategy that's really effective that she's going to talk about in terms of exercise, but it's broader than that. It can be used in other circumstances as well. The one thing I want to say about pacing is this is the hardest one, and give yourself some time and latitude to work on it and to perfect it. It's not a simple formula. It's more of an art than a science. And so you have to trial and error it a little bit to find the thing that fits for you. So don't be discouraged if pacing doesn't fall into place right away. It's something that we get to practice. And that brings me to talking about probably the best example I can really think of for pacing, and that is marathon. And that's where I want you to know that multiple little adjustments that you make throughout the course of your day that are both mental and physical adjustments really end up mattering by the end of the day. And that's what pacing is all about. So marathon. Eons ago when my husband and I first got married, we ran a couple of marathons together. And we ran our first one, and we ran it in 4 hours and some, and we were pleased. And we went to run our second one, and there was a workshop the day before the marathon on how to run a better marathon. You know, good timing, right? So we went to the workshop, and the gentleman said, if you walk for 1 minute of every mile up until mile 18, you will rest the muscles that are doing the running, and it will help you in the long run. After mile 18, it doesn't really matter because you've already blown through all of your energy reserves. So, you know, do whatever you need to do. You can walk, you can crawl on your lips, whatever it is you need to get to the finish line, go ahead and do that. So my husband and I said, well, that seems very simple. Let's try it. So we did, and we found that it was really difficult to actually employ. For one, you're at mile 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're walking, and you have all this long distance to go. So mentally it was very difficult to actually walk. And then the second was a competition factor where, you know, you've been running past all these people and now you're walking and you're not tired and all these people are passing you. But we persevered, and at the end of the marathon we had shaved 15 minutes off of our time. And so we were pretty thrilled about that. The other thing I'd like you to contemplate is creating a rest station. So when you do come home, or if you work from home, having a one place in your home where you can really sit down and let your body rest is important. The piece that's most important about that is having your supplies and things you need right around that area, because invariably when you sit down and you finally start to really relax, the phone rings or you sneeze. So having your phone nearby, having a Kleenex nearby, having the things that you need, a glass of water nearby, can really make that a more effective tool. And then that brings us to positioning, which is simply ergonomics. So how you use your body throughout the course of your day with the activities that you do really matters. So the thing you need to know is if you are standing to do something, you are using more energy than you would if you were sitting down. So things like showering, that's a good place to save a little bit of energy. Things like prep work in the kitchen where you're having to do the sous chef work of cutting and dicing, that can be done sitting down. So think about the ways in your day where you can save energy by using good posture and good ergonomics. Make sure your desk and your car are set up so that your body is not fatiguing. So we're going to talk a little bit about medical management and some of the things that are available to us there with Patty.
Thank you. So there are a lot of things, and those were great tips, Juliann, really practical things. And if all of those things you've tried and you're still having some difficulty, you want to talk with your healthcare professional about what else can be done for you. So one of the other things that can is, again, going back to this tracking that we talked about. Now, your healthcare professional might administer a survey to you that actually can kind of put a number, really nail down your fatigue. So I just put up a couple of the different fatigue scales that you might be introduced to by one of your healthcare professionals. First is called the Modified Fatigue Impact Scale. And there's 21 questions, and you're rating the questions from 0 to 4, meaning 0 is I've never had this issue, and 4 is almost always this is a problem for me. And on it, it has different statements. I've been less alert. I've been less motivated to participate in social activities. Muscles have felt weak. And you rate each one of those, and you'll get a total score. And there's also subcategories that can tell you, okay, physical fatigue is really an issue for you versus cognitive fatigue or psychosocial fatigue. So that's a way not only to kind of nail down what activities and what part of your fatigue is most problematic, but to track fatigue over time. Okay, you've done some, and then let's reassess you to see what impact that's had. The analog scale I've already talked to you about. It could be 0 to 10 or 1 to 10, with 10 being the maximum fatigue. And you just basically say, this is how much fatigue I have after this activity, or this is that scale that I'm introducing to you is called the fatigue severity scale. And again, it's a survey, 9 questions, and you rate your fatigue from 1 to 7. And there are similar questions on it as to the modified fatigue impact scale. Work, family, or social life. Exercise brings on fatigue, causes frequent problems for me. So again, you can kind of nail it down and get an actual number to quantify your fatigue. And there also are some medicines that are valuable in managing your fatigue, and you can talk to your physician or nurse practitioner about those. Most of them have been developed for something else, but we found that they can work for fatigue and MS. Antidine, Metrol, is something that actually was used in Parkinson's, and we found that it can kind of boost up your energy in MS. All of the newer drugs that are out, modafinil and armodafinil, are used to help with your alertness or your level of wakefulness. Ritalin is also used, dexedrine. Also, some of the antidepressants like Prozac or Wellbutrin, like some the 2-for-1 medicines, because not only can they help with mood, but they can also help with energy. And I list caffeine, and although caffeine is not by prescription, caffeine can also kind of give you that boost. Certainly, you want to be careful that you're not taking too much caffeine in. It's not good for health overall, and particularly if you have heart issues or some other reasons why you shouldn't have caffeine. Certainly want to consult with your physician about that. So There are other strategies too that don't require medicines, and one is cooling. So let's talk about that for a little bit because I'm from Florida, and that is a big issue down here. The effects of heat. So increasing your body temperature, whether it's from an external source like hot weather or a hot shower, or from an internal source, you have a fever, you have a bladder infection. That increase in your core temperature can increase your energy. It can increase symptoms that usually aren't even problematic for you, or old symptoms that kind of now and then, if you get overheated, they can really come to the surface. Fatigue is one of those. So you want to keep a cool environment, especially during exercise, and what's recommended is 62 to 60 degrees if you're able to get your house that cool, or if you're exercising in the gym. Make sure that you're under a fan or by an area where there's good airflow so the temperature is cool as possible and you can get evaporation off your skin. If you're exercising in a pool, you want to have the temperature less than 85 degrees. If there's not enough of a temperature gradient between your actual body temperature and the temperature of the pool water, you don't have a way to dump your heat out of your body. So if you're exercising in the water, and that usually feels great because you're buoyant, you're actually generating internal heat, and then you don't have a way to get rid of it. If you're out of the water and you're in a cool environment, you sweat and you evaporates on your skin. And if you just are somebody who just doesn't like to take a cool shower, take your warmer shower and then end with the coolest temperature that you can tolerate to kind of cool your body temperature down before you get out. Staying well hydrated and drinking cool liquids is really important. Actually, I find it funny that they did a research study on this, but they did, and they compared different ways to keep yourself cool. And they actually found that the number one way to keep yourself cool was to drink a Slurpee, an iced drink, and that cooled your core temperature down the best. Using cooling packs, scarves. There are a lot of products out there. Now we're going to talk about exercise and fatigue. And there is a lot of research and a lot of data out there to say that there's a lot of benefits of exercising to help managing. But I put this slide up here about the effects of inactivity. Everybody knows whether you have MS or you don't have MS. If you're inactive, if you're sedentary, you become physiologically more deconditioned. So then when you go to do something, do it as well, or you're really spent by that. Well, if you add MS symptoms into that, that really becomes a very circular pattern. Try to do something, you have to rest more because of your fatigue. You're fatigued, everything else suffers. So we want to break into that cycle, and exercise is one way to do it. We have some not so good news. We have good news and not so good news, so I'm giving you the not so good news first. There is research that supports that MS, living with MS, really truly do have worse physical fitness compared to non-MSers. Less aerobic fitness, strength, impaired balance by virtue of having the disease itself. And there are participating in an exercise program truly decrease your fatigue, as well as improve some of your other symptoms of MS, like walking issues and balance, and improve your overall quality of life. So I want to go over some components of an exercise program for you. And stretching is the first one. If you have the availability to be evaluated by a professional, an occupational therapist, certainly that would be best. They can evaluate you to see if you have any motion restrictions, have any of that spasticity, if your joints are unstable. Exercise program strengthening. And again, if you have the opportunity, you want to have a professional look at you and see what muscle groups are really weak and what is the appropriate form of exercise. A lot of people tell me, well, I have a weak muscle, and so I'm going to go to the gym and use weights. Well, it may not be appropriate for that muscle to tolerate weights yet. You may have to exercise in another way to build it up before you're ready for weights. You also want to work on the muscle groups that are going to help you attain your functional goals. Anybody can give you kind of an exercise program, but it may not work on the muscle groups that are most important for you to attain your functional goals. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't rest and then do more repetitions. That's an appropriate method of exercise. We're going to talk more about that in our next couple of aerobic training. We want to make sure that you're exercising times per week because that's what's going to give you kind of bang for your buck. When you're exercising aerobically means that you're exercising to bring your heart rate up. That exercise should feel somewhat hard. While you're doing the exercise, you feel like, oh gosh, this is so easy. On the flip side of that, it shouldn't feel so hard that you're really just gasping for air. So you want to feel like you're working somewhat. Let's take, for instance, this is really where you can kind of increase your heat, internal heat. So be very mindful that you're adapting to the environment appropriately. And so we've given you a lot of suggestions and a lot of tips. And so, Juliann, I was hoping that you could kind of just sum things up for us a little bit and give us some take-home points about fatigue management.
Yes, absolutely. And Patty, thank you so much. Those are just excellent applications for daily application to take and apply to exercise and to all the other activities of your life, particularly cooling. I think they're two really important areas that can be used to manage fatigue is exercise and keeping cool. So that was great. Really, to sum up, we'd like to ask you to increase your energy awareness. Becoming more aware of the signals that your body is sending when it is becoming fatigued. And then, just as Patty said, it gets much easier to rest before feeling fatigued, and that doesn't seem like such an impossible request. So sometimes things can begin to crop up too. Symptoms that you might notice you have when you're hot as you're becoming more fatigued can start to pop up a little bit. So let's say it might be a little harder to move your leg just slightly, or you might begin to start feeling a little bit hot, but you're not fully into heat, or your hand might feel a little tingly. I have a client that said she knows what her stopping point is or her back off point is when her fingertips start to tingle. And then she knows, oh, I've done a little too much and I need to start scaling back and I need to do it right now. So our reprieve breaks can be 30 seconds to 1 minute. They really don't have to be very long. We think it's so important to keep a schedule log and record your daily activities, to use some of the tracking devices that Patty was talking about and some of the tools that we were talking about to really begin to understand your fatigue level and when you can push it and when you need to stop and what kind of rest breaks need to be placed in throughout your day. In that way, by keeping that schedule log and recording those things, you can look to see if there are any patterns. Most of us operate out of patterns in all kinds of ways in our life, and the thing about it is that we really don't know that. We don't see them because we do them every day and we've become very used to them. And so when we write them down, we can have an aha moment of, oh, you know what, I really didn't realize I was doing that. I was pushing myself too hard for dinner, or I was pushing myself, or I'm really tired and I need to take a break before I commute home from work. And then the last thing that we encourage you to do is to use what works for you. You probably are already employing a lot of really good strategies. And then modify or discard the things that aren't working for you. So empowering yourself to make the changes you need to make to allow yourself to participate in the things that you need to do and the things that you want to do. And that concludes my portion of the webinar. Patty, do you have any comments to add to the end of it here?
I think that there were a lot of great practical tips. Something that came across my desk just today was in the aspect of cooling was a patient brought to me a cooling bed. It has the same technology in it that your car seats have for cooling and heating in them. So there are a lot of ways, some of them more expensive than others, to keep yourself cool and manage your fatigue. So as Juliann, as you said, use what works for you, modify and discard what doesn't.
That's very cool. Pun intended.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Juliann and Patty, for that wonderful presentation. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to go onto our website, www.mscando.org. You can leave comments and questions, and we will try to get answers to them. Also on our website, lots of really great resources from Patty and Juliann and all our other MS experts. You can ask the Can Do team. There's a library of articles and the updates. And again, all of our webinars are archived on our website along with associated articles. So there's a great article on fatigue management that Juliann and Patty co-wrote, so you can find that on our website. And we also encourage you to visit www.iconquerms.org. This is a nonprofit that we're collaborating with on a nationwide research project. And by participating, you can help advance the fight against MS. So that website, please. And join us on November 10th, 2015 for our next webinar, which is Getting Creative in the Kitchen, just in time for the holidays. We'll be joined by Denise Nowak, who's a registered dietitian, as well as Anna Cotton, an occupational therapist, to find tools and techniques to make cooking easier and more fun. So thank you again, Juliann and Patty, for that great information, and thank you all for joining us this evening.